The world was not always ours. Long before we carved tools or painted on stone, the earth belonged to beasts larger, stronger, and far more terrifying than us. Imagine a horizon filled not with skyscrapers and roads, but with tusks, claws, and wings, creatures so vast that we seemed like shadows moving at their feet. For millions of years, humans were not the hunters of this world, but its most fragile survivors. Hello there, and welcome to BoneAge. My name is Thomas. Tonight, we're exploring a story not of triumph, but of terror, the day the world itself seemed to turn against us. What if the human story is not the tale of mighty conquerors, but of prey that learned, painfully, to resist extinction? What if the roots of our intelligence, our myths, and even our fears were forged in an age when survival meant hiding more often than hunting, when every rustle in the dark might be the last sound you ever heard? Picture yourself on the plains of Africa 2 million years ago. The air carries the low rumble of mammoths moving in the distance. The shadows of lions drift like ghosts at the tree line. Saber-toothed cats crouch unseen in the tall grass. Above, massive birds circle with eyes fixed on the ground. And in this world, you are smaller, slower, more fragile than nearly everything else. To step into this ancient earth is to step into a world where humans were not yet masters, but an endangered idea, always one heartbeat away from silence. Scientists tell us that around 900,000 years ago, our species nearly vanished altogether. A genetic bottleneck reduced the population to barely more than 1,000 survivors. For over 100,000 years, humanity clung to existence by the thinnest thread. Perhaps this fragility explains why every myth of monsters, every whisper of terror in the night, echoes with something older than language. This is not a debate, but an exploration, not of certainty, but of possibility. Tonight, we walk alongside our ancestors in a world of giants, and before we can understand how the hunted became hunters, we have to return to the beginning, to an earth swarming with predators beyond imagination. 2 million years ago, the earth was alive with a weight and presence we can scarcely imagine. Step into that landscape and you would feel it pressing against you, the ground trembling beneath the herds, the air vibrating with the low calls of colossal beasts. This was a time when life grew not in moderation, but in extremes. The world had tilted toward gigantism, producing creatures so vast and so powerful that they seemed like forces of nature rather than animals. Across the open plains moved mammoths, towering above the grasslands like walking mountains. Their tusks curved like pale crescents against the horizon, each step pressing a memory into the soil that could last for centuries. Beside them, woolly rhinoceroses plowed through scrublands, their horns like lances aimed at the sky. To encounter one was not to meet another mammal, but to stand before a charging storm. And predators, too, matched the scale. Imagine the lion, not as it exists today, but larger, heavier, faster, the apex of its age. These cave lions spread across Europe, Asia, and Africa, their paw prints overlapping with those of early humans. At the edges of rivers and forests lurked saber-toothed cats, their jaws armed with blades longer than your hand, designed not just to pierce but to shatter. And in the south, flightless birds with hooked beaks stalked the savannas, creatures tall as a man, fast as a horse, built for pursuit. Everywhere danger waited. The world itself was a gauntlet, and humans were among its smallest players. Picture yourself among them. Your body is lean, your height barely reaching the shoulder of a grazing oryx. The air is thick with the scent of dung and crushed grass, the sound of insects layered over the distant trumpeting of elephants. You move quietly, always on edge, every sense stretched thin. For in this world you are fragile. Your skin tears easily, your bones snap more quickly than those of the beasts you watch. You cannot outrun a lion, you cannot overpower a rhino, and even the birds might chase you down. And yet, here you are, not alone but among a small band, huddled shapes moving carefully through tall grass, trying not to be seen. Survival here means patience, silence, cunning. The giants rule the open, so you cling to the margins, the shadows of trees, the cracks of cliffs, the hollows of caves when they are not already claimed by something fiercer. Scientists call this period the Pleistocene, the Great Ice Age epoch. It was a time of shifting climates, warm plains giving way to glaciers, tundras opening where once there had been forests. Animals adapted by growing bigger, stronger, more formidable. But humans did not grow larger. Instead, they became more cautious, more cooperative, more dependent on thought than on muscle. Perhaps this was the crucible that began to shape us. What if the reason we did not perish, like so many fragile species before us, was precisely because we were weak? A mammoth could survive alone, but a human could not. A saber-tooth could dominate by strength, but a human needed something else: memory, imagination, the ability to whisper a warning, to signal with a gesture, to anticipate what had not yet happened. In a world of giants, our minds became our tusks, our claws, our speed. Imagine a night on those ancient plains. The air is cold, sharpened by ice age winds. Your small group gathers at the edge of a fire, perhaps stolen from lightning, perhaps nurtured from embers carried across days. The light flickers against anxious faces. Beyond that circle of flame, the dark is alive. Somewhere in the tall grass, something watches. The lions are hunting, or maybe the hyenas. The sound of their feet does not reach you, but you feel them anyway, a pressure in the air, the silence before movement. To sleep here is to trust the fire, to hope that it burns until morning. And so we ask, what did it mean to live in a world that was never safe? Did this constant tension, this unending state of being prey, shape the very architecture of our minds? Could our capacity for fear, for anxiety, for storytelling itself be the inheritance of those nights when we were surrounded by monsters? Archaeological sites whisper of this age. Bones of humans, gnawed by predators, scattered in caves that were not homes but lairs. Teeth marks pressed into fossilized skeletons, evidence that we were hunted as often as we scavenged. To read these traces is to glimpse the truth. Humanity began not as ruler, but as quarry, and yet we endured. Through drought, through ice, through the footsteps of mammoths and the roar of lions, we remained, against all odds. Before we can explore how this fragility turned into strength, we must linger a little longer in the shadow of these creatures to understand the scale of the world we inherited and the odds stacked so heavily against us. For this was the age of giants, a time when the earth itself seemed to declare that humans did not belong. And still somehow we found a way to belong anyway. To step deeper into this world of giants is to realize something both humbling and unsettling. Our ancestors were not at the top of the food chain. They were not the hunters who ruled the plains, but the nervous figures clinging to the margins, scavengers moving in shadows, hoping to steal scraps from the jaws of beasts. Imagine yourself at the edge of a savanna 2 million years ago. The air shimmers with heat, and in the distance a lion pride brings down a zebra. Dust rises, a struggle of muscle and claw, the sound of bone snapping carried on the wind. For hours the lions feed, their growls echoing across the plain. Only when their bellies are full, only when they retreat into the shade, does your small band move closer. You pick through the remains, strips of sinew, shards of marrow-filled bone, fragments left behind that mean survival. You do not eat first, you eat last. This was the reality for early humans. Archaeological sites reveal bones of large animals split open by stone tools, not in the patterns of primary hunters, but of opportunists arriving late. The marks tell the story. Predators tore through flesh, and afterward humans cracked open what was left. It was not glory, it was desperation, and when scavenging was impossible, hiding was the only option. Picture nightfall without fire. The darkness swallows the horizon, and every sound is amplified. The cough of a leopard, the shriek of hyenas, the rustle of wings in tall grass. You curl into yourself, pressed close to others for warmth, heart pounding at every sound. To be prey is to never rest fully, to dream only in fragments, to wake with eyes wide before the dawn. Perhaps this explains why our species learned fear so deeply. Fear was not weakness, it was memory written into bone. Fear kept us from wandering too far from shelter. Fear made us listen, sharpened our eyes to catch the flick of a tail in the grass. Fear was the inheritance of prey. Consider the hyena, larger in that age than today, jaws capable of crushing bones with casual ease. They ruled not in singles, but in packs, bold enough to chase humans from their own shelters. The caves we imagine as our first homes were often stolen dens, contested spaces where survival was negotiated under threat. To walk into a cavern was to gamble with death. Was it empty or already claimed by beasts whose patience did not extend to sharing? And yet, in this fragile existence, there was resilience. Humans learned to watch the skies for circling vultures, to track the calls of scavengers, to sense where predators fed and when it was safe to approach. This was knowledge born not of dominance, but of necessity. What if the very foundations of human intelligence, the ability to anticipate, to plan, to strategize, were sharpened in these moments of waiting at the edges of death? Speculation invites us to wonder, did early humans already whisper stories to each other about the monsters of the dark? Perhaps every shadow became a tale, every kill sight a lesson. A rustle in the tall grass was not just an animal, it was the embodiment of danger, the first ghosts in our imagination. To be prey is to live in a mythology of survival, a constant rewriting of the world in terms of threat and refuge. Science gives us glimpses of this precarious life. Fossil remains of early humans bear tooth marks, the unmistakable signatures of lions, saber-tooths, and hyenas. These were not abstract dangers. They were teeth at the throat, claws at the chest. The bones tell us plainly, humans were meals, part of the chain of consumption, and still from these fragile lives, our lineage continued. Now imagine a different moment. A carcass lies abandoned, the ribs jutting like spears, the air thick with the stench of decay. Your band approaches carefully. The predators are gone, but danger lingers, the possibility of return, the swarming insects, the chance of disease. You crouch, break bone with stone, scoop marrow with fingers, tasting survival in its rawest form. The meal is not pleasure, it is persistence, another day held back from the void. Perhaps this is why our ancestors valued togetherness so fiercely. Alone, one human was nothing. Together, even without weapons, there was the chance to warn, to distract, to rush in at a moment's opportunity. The bond between individuals was not sentiment, it was survival. To belong to the group was to live, to be cast out was to face the teeth of the world alone. Speculation drifts here into something deeper. Could it be that our capacity for empathy, for cooperation, even for love, emerged in the crucible of being prey? That the vulnerability of our flesh forced us into the strength of connection. When every shadow was a threat, the presence of another heartbeat beside you meant safety, however small. The first tenderness, the first shared glance, may have been nothing more than a survival instinct, but over time it became the fabric of what makes us human, and so we see early humans not as hunters of legend, but as survivors of necessity. They were scavengers at the edges of kills, shadows at the margins of firelight, fragile beings shaped by the constant weight of predators. To live was not to conquer, but to endure. To endure meant hiding more often than fighting, running more often than chasing, waiting more often than striking. This was the lesson of the prey species, that survival did not belong to the strongest or the fastest, but to the most watchful, the most cautious, the most adaptable. And perhaps, in the long arc of time, this weakness became our strength. Among all the predators of the ancient world, few carried the same aura of dread as the saber-toothed cat. To say its name is to conjure an image that feels more myth than biology. A predator armed not with ordinary fangs, but with scimitars of bone and enamel, blades that could pierce deep into flesh, crushing windpipes and spilling life in an instant. Smilodon fatalis, Smilodon populator, different species, but all sharing the same grim signature. Teeth that stretched longer than your hand, honed through evolution into weapons designed for ambush. Unlike the lions of today, who hunt in prides, the saber-tooth was built for stealth. Muscular forelimbs carried a body built low to the ground, heavy and compact, capable of explosive bursts of power. Its jaws could open to a shocking angle, wider than any modern big cat, accommodating those enormous canines. It did not kill by suffocating prey slowly, but by striking with surgical violence. A slash across the neck, a puncture at the throat, and the hunt was over. For early humans, this predator was more than a danger. It was a shadow written across the land. Fossil evidence tells us that humans were not always hunters of saber-tooths, but their victims. In certain sites, human bones have been found marked with the grooves of saber-tooth canines, grim signatures of encounters that ended with silence and blood. To stumble upon one of these cats was not an even match. It was a death sentence. Picture the scene. You move through the tall grasses of a savanna at dusk. The air is golden, filled with the hum of insects. You are searching for roots, maybe a carcass left behind by other predators. You believe the field is empty, but you are wrong. 100 feet away, hidden perfectly in the grass, a Smilodon crouches. It has watched you for hours, patient and still. Its muscles are coiled springs, its gaze unblinking. You are not aware until it is too late. A rustle, a leap, a weight heavier than anything you can resist. The last thing you see is a flash of ivory curving towards your neck. This was not rare. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived alongside these creatures, always at risk of becoming their prey. And perhaps in the deep time of memory, this shaped something within us. Consider the myths of monsters in the dark, the recurring human terror of glowing eyes watching from the shadows. Could it be that the origin of these fears lies in the age of saber-tooths, when every twilight was a question of survival? Science offers another dimension to this predator-prey relationship. Smilodon was not a runner. Unlike cheetahs, it did not sprint across open ground. Its body was too heavy, its limbs too thick. Instead, it was an ambush hunter, relying on concealment and sudden violence. That meant every thicket, every patch of grass, every cave could conceal death. For early humans, the land itself became uncertain, every step tinged with suspicion. Survival was not only about gathering food, it was about reading the landscape as a language of threats, a broken branch, a silence among birds, the faintest shadow. These were clues that could mean the difference between life and extinction. Speculation invites us to ask, what if the very act of scanning horizons, of interpreting signs, of imagining what might lie beyond sight was born in these encounters? Perhaps imagination itself, the ability to picture what is unseen, was sharpened by the presence of saber-toothed cats. To survive them, our ancestors had to anticipate danger before it arrived. They had to see what was not there yet, and that capacity may be the seed of storytelling, of planning, of dreaming. Now imagine a firelit night. Your band has gathered bones from a scavenged carcass. The fire crackles, keeping the hyenas at bay, but saber-tooths are not so easily deterred. In the darkness beyond the firelight, one crouches, watching. It does not charge into flame, but waits, silent and patient, for a moment when the fire burns low, when one of you strays too far into shadow. The fear is not only of attack, it is of anticipation, the knowledge that you are being watched by something you cannot see. That pressure in the dark, that primal unease that still lingers when we walk alone at night, may be the echo of these moments. Archaeologists studying predator-prey interactions note that early humans adapted not by outmuscling their predators, but by adjusting their behavior. They began to form tighter groups, to use lookouts, to control fire more carefully, to occupy spaces where visibility reduced the chance of ambush. These strategies were not luxuries, they were essential. Without them, humanity might not have survived long enough to leave a trace. There is a strange irony here. Smilodon, for all its ferocity, eventually went extinct, while its fragile prey endured. Perhaps its specialization was its undoing. The enormous teeth that made it a terror also made it vulnerable. They were delicate, prone to breaking, requiring precise hunting strategies. If prey grew scarce or landscapes shifted, Smilodon may have lacked the flexibility to adapt. Humans, by contrast, were endlessly flexible. We scavenged, we hid, we adapted. The very weakness that made us vulnerable also made us resilient. Speculative reflection lingers here. Did the extinction of the saber-tooth coincide with the rise of human confidence? When the shadows that once held monsters grew empty, did we begin to step into the open with less fear, more boldness? Did we inherit not only the memory of dread, but also the triumph of having outlasted it? The bones of Smilodon rest in tar pits and caves, their great teeth still gleaming after tens of thousands of years. They are relics of a time when humans were hunted, when our role in the world was small, fragile, uncertain. And yet, those bones also tell another story, that we lived through it, that we endured the most perfect predators ever to stalk the plains, and perhaps in their shadow we began to become something new. When the sun sank below the horizon in the age of giants, safety did not arrive with the night. Darkness was not a curtain of rest, but an opening of danger, a stage upon which unseen predators prowled. For early humans, every dusk was a gamble. In the long shadows cast by dwindling light, fear became a companion, a teacher, and perhaps even the first storyteller. Picture the scene, a circle of fire glowing faintly against the black. Sparks rise like ghosts into the void above. Around the flame sit a handful of figures, shoulders hunched, eyes darting between the light and the dark beyond it. They hear the rustle of grass, the snap of a twig, the low cough of a predator. Each sound carries the weight of possibility. Was it only the wind, or was it something watching? In that space of uncertainty, imagination takes shape, And here perhaps lies the origin of monsters, saber-tooths with their unnatural fangs and their silent ambushes may have carved themselves not only into bone but into memory. Long after the fire crackled low, the mind still conjured the gleam of ivory teeth in the dark. To see glowing eyes beyond the fire was to see more than an animal. It was to face a force of terror. Over generations those encounters hardened into stories, warnings whispered in firelight, myths of beings half real, half imagined. The beasts became symbols, embodiments of fear itself. Archaeologists have found sites where humans huddled around ancient hearths, the stone rings blackened by repeated use. Fire was not only warmth, not only a tool for cooking, it was a psychological shield. It created a fragile boundary between safety and chaos. Within its glow, humans could talk, plan, dream. Beyond it, predators lurked. The line between firelight and darkness was the line between life and death. Speculation lingers. Could the stories we still tell, the dragons, the demons, the creatures with burning eyes and impossible fangs, be echoes of saber-toothed nights? What if mythology itself began as a survival tool, a way of encoding warnings into tales that children would remember? A rustle in the tall grass was not just grass. It was a lesson. Do not wander. Do not leave the fire. Stay with the group, or the monsters will take you. Neuroscientists today speak of how fear sharpens memory. A frightening event is remembered more vividly than a neutral one. Perhaps in those early days, the ambushes of predators, the sudden loss of a companion, the rush of adrenaline at a sound in the dark, these were etched more deeply than anything else. Around the fire, retelling them ensured survival. This is what happened when he walked too far. This is what waits beyond the trees. The stories became not only culture, but strategy. Imagine a child in such a camp. The fire flickers across their face as an elder speaks in hushed tones. The child's eyes widen as the tale unfolds. A saber-tooth waiting in tall grass, a figure dragged into shadow, a scream cut short. The child trembles, but the fear becomes knowledge. They will not stray tomorrow, they will remember, and so fear, passed through story, became an inheritance. The symbolic weight of the saber-tooth outlasted the animal itself. Long after Smilodon disappeared, humans continued to invent creatures that filled the same role. Nocturnal predators, fanged beasts that strike from darkness. The myths shifted with landscapes, lions, wolves, demons, spirits, but their bones may all be traced back to the same origin. Nights of firelight, where every sound in the grass could mean death. Modern psychology offers a curious reflection of this ancient inheritance. The fears most common in childhood, of the dark, of being watched, of glowing eyes, are not random. They map almost perfectly onto the dangers our ancestors faced. These fears do not need to be taught. They rise unbidden, echoing down the corridors of time. What if they are not weaknesses, but survival codes still imprinted in us? Remnants of a world where fear was the difference between life and extinction. Consider also the ritual of storytelling itself. Around those fires, humans began to frame the world not only as it was, but as it might be. They imagined threats before they arrived. They gave names to dangers, turned uncertainty into narrative. Perhaps this was the birth of symbolic thought. To tell a story is to shape reality, to prepare minds for what they cannot yet see. And in a world ruled by predators, such preparation was everything. Now picture another night. The fire is nearly gone, embers glowing faintly in the ash. Beyond the circle, two eyes gleam in silence. A saber-tooth crouches low, watching. It does not charge, it waits. Within the camp, one figure senses it, stands, throws wood on the fire. The flames leap, and the eyes vanish into shadow. The camp breathes again. But the story of that moment will be told and retold long after the cat is gone. Fear has been written into memory, reinforced by firelight, etched into the shared imagination of the group. Speculative reflection whispers, perhaps fire itself became sacred, not only because it cooked food or warded off cold, but because it turned the unknowable dark into something just barely manageable. In its glow, humans saw that the monsters could be held back if only for a night. Fire was not just survival. It was hope, the first fragile god, born in the face of saber-toothed dread. Thus, in every crackle of wood, every flicker of flame, we can still hear the echo of those ancient nights. The predators are gone, their bones locked in tar and stone, but the fear they inspired endures. In the myths we tell, the monsters we invent, the shiver we feel when darkness presses close. Fear was written in firelight, and it still burns within us. If saber-tooths ruled with stealth and sudden violence, there was another predator that claimed dominion in a very different way. The hyena. Not the smaller laughing scavengers you might imagine from the savannas of today, but colossal versions twice the size, jaws like crushing vices, packs so formidable they shaped entire landscapes. In the age before human mastery, hyenas were not the tricksters of stories, they were kings. Picture them in your mind, creatures standing as tall as a man's chest, shoulders rippling with muscle, their heads massive and heavy, built for pressure. Their teeth did not slice delicately like a cat's, but pulverized bone, turning skeletons to splinters. They were not hunters of elegance, but scavengers of inevitability, overwhelming through numbers, persistence, and raw power. Where they gathered, few could oppose them. For early humans, hyenas were not distant threats lurking at the edge of the horizon. They were direct competitors. Both species sought shelter. Both sought meat. Both gathered around carcasses left on the plains. But one had strength and the other did not. Time and again, archaeological sites reveal caves thick with hyena bones and gnawed remains of other animals, including humans. These dens were fortresses of scavenger overlords, decorated with the fragments of their feasts. To step into such a cave was to trespass on a throne room. Imagine a cold night on the steppe. Your small band approaches the mouth of a cave, desperate for shelter from the wind. Inside, warmth radiates from still air, protection from the storm outside, but as you press deeper into the shadows, the smell reaches you. Rank, acrid, the scent of meat long decayed. Then you hear it, a low growl multiplied by several voices, a chorus of menace. Eyes glow in the dark. The cave is not empty. The kings are home. What choice do you have? You retreat into the cold, driven back into exposure. The cave belongs to them. This was the reality for countless generations. Hyenas claimed the most secure shelters, and humans learned to adapt by building temporary structures, shelters of bone and hide when caves were denied. The very architecture of early human life may have been shaped by this forced displacement. In a sense, our first innovation in housing was a response to hyena dominance. Speculation stretches further. What if hyenas shaped our very sense of territory, of belonging, of contested space? To fight for a cave was to risk annihilation, so humans learned to seek other forms of safety. To avoid confrontation was not cowardice, it was wisdom. Perhaps in this dance of avoidance we learned strategy, foresight, the ability to yield in order to endure. But there were moments of direct competition. Fossil evidence tells of bones cracked open by hyena jaws, but also of hyena remains cut with human tools. It was not always retreat. Sometimes humans push back, pried food from the scavenger's grip, lit fires at cave mouths to smoke them out. These were not easy victories. They were battles written in blood and ash. And here too we can imagine the firelight scene. A group huddled near a cave mouth, flames casting shadows across stone. From deeper within, hyenas watch, snarling, unwilling to leave but cautious of fire. A stalemate forms, a fragile balance between two species who both hunger, who both need shelter. The tension is thick, the night stretched into eternity. This is not the story of human dominance. It is the story of coexistence on the edge of survival. Perhaps this constant rivalry imprinted itself into our imagination as well. Hyenas became symbols of chaos, of lurking danger, of thieves who steal what is not theirs. Even in later mythologies, hyenas carry an aura of menace, of laughter that is not joy but mockery. Could this cultural memory stretch back to the Pleistocene, when their presence forced us from the warmth of caves into the vulnerability of the open? Science tells us these giant hyenas, Pachycrocata brevirostris, were apex scavengers of their time, ranging from Africa into Eurasia. They lived in clans that dominated carcasses, chasing away even lions. Their bite force was immense, their endurance unmatched. And while they were not sleek hunters, they did not need to be. Their power lay in persistence, in the sheer inevitability of their presence. For humans, every encounter was a lesson. To lose a carcass to hyenas was to lose days of survival. To lose a cave was to face freezing nights. Each defeat left a scar not only on the body, but on the mind. And in those scars, strategies formed. Humans learned to guard their kills with fire, to watch for circling shapes on the horizon, to anticipate the arrival of scavengers before they appeared. Vigilance was sharpened by the constant shadow of hyena kings. Speculative reflection whispers, what if this rivalry was one of the crucibles of cooperation? Alone, a human could not resist a pack, but together, armed with stones and fire, perhaps they could. Each clash reinforced the truth that unity was survival. The hyenas may have been kings of their time, but in forcing humans to band tightly, to defend one another, they may have sown the seeds of the resilience that would one day surpass them. Now, imagine the silence after such a conflict. The cave is won, the hyenas driven off, their growls fading into the night. Within the shelter, humans gather, exhausted but alive. The fire burns, bones are split for marrow, and a story is told of beasts with laughter like thunder, of jaws that could shatter stone, of a battle survived. The story is not only memory, it is preparation. Tomorrow others will know to be cautious, to be clever, to never underestimate the kings who still roam. Thus, hyenas ruled not only the land, but the mind. Their dominance shaped our shelters, our strategies, our fears, and perhaps even our myths. And though their reign has faded, their shadow lingers, in the caution we feel when something rustles near the edge of night, in the unease that comes when laughter carries from unseen places. The hyena kings may be gone, but their legacy remains, written in the very way humans learned to survive. To live alongside the hyenas of the Ice Age was not merely to face predators, it was to face rivals, thieves who stole not only food, but the very ground beneath your feet. If saber-tooths taught humans to fear the hidden strike, hyenas taught them a different lesson, that nothing they gained was ever secure, that survival itself was a contested prize, always on the verge of being taken. Imagine this scene. Your band spends half a day tracking a herd of antelope across the plains. The kill is not yours. You are too fragile to bring down such beasts alone, but you find a carcass left behind by lions, ribs gleaming where flesh has been torn away. With sharp stone tools you set to work, prying marrow from bone, slicing the scraps the lions missed. For a moment, hope rises. This meal will keep you alive. But then a sound, a low whoop, carried on the wind, another, then another, multiplied until the night itself seems to laugh. The hyenas have caught your scent. Shapes appear on the horizon, large and unhurried. They know you cannot resist. They know your fire is small, your numbers too few. Within minutes they close in, their teeth bared in mockery. You scatter, fleeing into the grass, watching as they take what was yours. Every bite they chew is a reminder. In this world, you eat only when the kings allow it. Archaeological evidence tells us this was no rare encounter. Hyena dens contain not only the bones of mammoths, rhinos, and deer, but also the bones of humans, cracked and splintered for marrow. They were not just opportunists feeding on scraps. They were overlords, taking food directly from others, shaping the behavior of entire ecosystems. For humans, the presence of hyenas meant not only danger, but exhaustion, the constant need to move, to abandon shelters, to scavenge anew. Speculation lingers here. Could it be that our restless spirit, our instinct to wander, to move on when the ground feels unsafe, was honed in these encounters? Perhaps the nomadic rhythm of humanity, the refusal to settle for too long in one place, was born of necessity. To remain was to invite theft. To survive was to stay one step ahead of the thieves of survival. And it was not only meals they stole. Caves, too, were contested. To find a cave was to find sanctuary, protection from the wind and predators. But hyenas claimed them, filling them with bones, with the echoes of their laughter. Time and again, humans were forced back into the open, building shelters of mammoth bones and hides in the cold, inventing architecture in defiance of displacement. The very act of creating home may have been shaped by this rivalry. Hyenas drove us out, and we responded by building. Picture the desperation of such a moment, a family huddled in a cave, their fire glowing faintly, children asleep. The night is still. Then comes the sound of paws at the entrance, the rumbling chorus of growls. Shadows move against the firelight. The pack has come. The humans rise, brandishing burning branches, shouting into the dark. But the hyenas do not flee easily. They circle, testing, pressing forward. The fire sputters low, fear rises, and in the end, the humans abandon the cave, fleeing into the night as the pack pours in. Another home stolen, another night of cold, another memory of loss etched into bone. This cycle of theft shaped not only our movements but our minds. To live in constant displacement is to never trust security. Perhaps this is why humans became creatures of foresight, always planning for the next step, never content with what they have, always wary of what might be taken away. Hyenas may have been among the first to teach us that survival depends on anticipation, that safety is never permanent, only borrowed. Speculative reflection deepens the thought. Did hyenas leave their mark on our myths as tricksters and thieves, symbols of chaos and disorder? In many cultures, they remain associated with grave robbing, with laughter that mocks, with shadows that steal. Could these cultural echoes stretch back tens of thousands of years, born from nights when their laughter rose over camps, when their presence turned triumph into despair? And yet there is a strange irony here. In being forced into constant flight, humans may have developed the very qualities that would one day secure their dominance. Mobility became our strength. Resourcefulness, adaptability, the refusal to cling to one place or one strategy, these were honed by loss. Every meal stolen was a lesson. Every cave taken was a challenge. Every night in the cold was a spark that lit innovation. Now picture another scene, the aftermath of displacement. Your band sits in the open, no shelter, no firewood left. The children are hungry. In the silence, one elder begins to speak, voice low, words rhythmic. They tell the story of the hyenas, of their laughter, of their thievery. The story is not only a lament, it is a teaching. Tomorrow the group will choose a different shelter, place the fire differently, keep watch more carefully. The story transforms theft into knowledge, loss into memory. Science tells us humans eventually turned this rivalry around. By the time Homo sapiens spread widely, fire was mastered, tools sharpened, strategies refined. Hyenas still stole, still threatened, but the balance had begun to shift. And yet the scars remained. The instinct to guard food, to protect shelter, to mistrust the night. These may all be echoes of a time when hyenas ruled our lives as thieves of survival. Speculation lingers. Could it be that our deep-seated anxiety about scarcity, our fear of losing what we have, our drive to protect resources at all costs, finds its roots in this age? Perhaps the laughter of hyenas still echoes faintly in the human psyche, a reminder that what we hold can always be taken away. Thus, hyenas were more than predators. They were forces that reshaped human existence, driving us into motion, teaching us vigilance, pushing us to innovate, and leaving behind a legacy of restless survival. They were thieves, but in stealing from us, they may have given us something greater, the relentless determination to endure. If the hyenas ruled with persistence and theft, there was another predator that held dominion with majesty and raw power. The cave lion, Panthera leo spelaea, was among the largest cats to ever walk the earth. Larger than any lion alive today, heavier, more formidable, they ranged across Europe, Asia, and Africa, appearing in nearly every place early humans tried to settle. Wherever we went, their paw prints were already pressed into the soil. Imagine standing at the edge of a Pleistocene plain. Herds of horses thunder in the distance. Mammoths graze slowly, their tusks shining pale in the light. And there, crouched in the tall grass, the cave lion waits. Its body is massive, its shoulders higher than your chest, muscles rippling beneath fur. Eyes locked on prey, it is silent, patient, a master of timing. When it strikes, the ground shakes beneath the power of its leap. Skeletons confirm their dominance. Their size exceeded that of modern African lions by nearly 25%. Some males may have weighed over 800 pounds, built for both speed and strength. Unlike today's lions, they bore no manes. Their faces more austere, their bodies streamlined for hunting in colder climates. Their remains are found from Britain to Siberia, evidence of a range that overlapped entirely with human migration. They were not local threats, they were global rulers. For humans, the cave lion was more than competition, it was a barrier. Archaeological evidence shows lions claimed caves long before we did. Scratch marks on walls, bones carried into dens, layers of occupation reveal that these predators dominated the very shelters we craved. To step into a cave meant stepping into their empire. Fire may have deterred hyenas, but lions required more than flame. They required submission, avoidance, or in desperate times, battle. Speculation leads us to imagine, what if every cave painting of lions, every carving etched into stone, was not only art but warning? Ancient humans drew them with reverence, with detail, as though acknowledging their rule. Perhaps the images were not trophies but testaments. We lived in their shadow. We crossed their paths. We survived their empire. Picture a human band moving into new territory. They find a cave, its walls dry and safe, its entrance narrow enough to guard, but inside they find signs, the deep scent of musk, the remains of prey half-eaten, the marks of claws gouged into stone. The decision is immediate. They retreat, for this is not their place. It belongs to the lions. Yet there were moments of contest. Fossil records reveal lion bones bearing cut marks, evidence that humans did at times kill them. Perhaps it was defense, perhaps desperation. But these encounters were rare, costly. To face a lion was to risk annihilation. A single misstep, and the pride would strike with unstoppable force. Now imagine the firelight again. A group huddled at the cave mouth, flames flickering. Beyond, the night echoes with roars. They are not distant, they are close, vibrating through the bones of those who listen. The children cover their ears. The elders glance at each other with fear. In such moments, the line between animal and deity blurs. The lion was not just predator. It was power incarnate, a living god of the plains. Speculative reflection deepens. Could it be that our earliest notions of kingship, of rulers who demanded respect and obedience, were shaped by these encounters? The lion ruled territory absolutely, commanding fear and awe. Perhaps the human mind, seeking to understand power, modeled its first myths of dominion on the predators who already held it. Science tells us that cave lions preyed on large herbivores, horses, reindeer, bison, but humans were never safe. Some fossils of children bear tooth marks that match lion jaws, grim evidence that we too were hunted. The empire of the lions extended over prey of all kinds, and humans were no exception. And yet we endured within their realm. We learned to track their movements, to recognize their calls, to avoid their hunting grounds. In time, we painted them on cave walls, not only as warnings, but as part of our shared story. In Chauvet Cave, one of the oldest sites of human art, lions are depicted with astonishing realism, their bodies fluid, their expressions fierce. These were not crude sketches, they were portraits of neighbors, rivals, gods. Imagine the scene in that cave, tens of thousands of years ago. Torches flicker against stone, smoke curling toward the ceiling. An artist, crouched with ochre and charcoal, draws the outline of a lion. Around them, others watch silently, the firelight animating the form, making it seem alive. The cave becomes a theater, the walls alive with predators that dominate the outside world. In those moments, humans did not defeat the lions. They honored them, feared them, perhaps hoped that by capturing them in art, they could capture a measure of their power. Speculation whispers that this was the seed of religion, of symbolic reverence. To face such predators without hope of dominance required another strategy: imagination, ritual, the belief that symbols could grant control where flesh could not. The empire of the lions was not only physical, it was spiritual, pressing humans to create meaning from fear. But the empire did not last forever. In time, humans grew bolder, armed with sharper tools, stronger fires, tighter cooperation. Cave lions dwindled, their range shrinking, their power challenged. By the end of the Ice Age, they were gone, extinct, and yet their legacy remains, not only in bones, but in the very structure of our stories. Tales of kings, of gods with lion faces, of rulers demanding awe. To live in the cave lion empire was to live in a world where humans were not yet rulers, but trespassers moving carefully through lands already claimed. It was a lesson in humility, in caution, in reverence for power greater than our own, and perhaps in surviving that empire, we began to imagine our own. The story of humanity is often told as a rise from caves, as though those dark spaces were our first natural homes. But the truth is more complicated, more humbling. The caves were not ours. They belonged to lions first. Picture a vast cavern in Ice Age Europe. The walls echo with dripping water, the floor littered with the remains of bones carried in over generations. Scratches line the stone, carved not by tools but by claws. The air smells of musk, of predators, of death. This was not a home, it was a throne room, and its sovereigns were lions. For early humans, shelter was survival. Fire needed walls to hold its warmth. Families needed stone to block the wind, but every cave they entered was a gamble. Was it empty, waiting to become a sanctuary? Or was it already claimed, the den of lions who would return with blood still fresh on their muzzles? Archaeologists have uncovered countless caves where human artifacts are mingled with lion remains, layered evidence of alternating occupation. These were not peaceful homes, they were battlefields, claimed and reclaimed with each passing season. Imagine the moment of decision. A band of humans arrives at a cave after days of exposure on the plains. Their firewood is nearly gone, their children shivering. The cave promises salvation. They step inside, and for a brief moment hope rises. But in the shadows they find bones, fresh claw marks, the acrid scent of predators. The choice is stark: risk a confrontation, or retreat into the cold night. Survival demands humility. Many times they retreated, yet sometimes they stayed. Sometimes the war for shelter was fought with fire, with stones, with desperate courage. Picture flames at the cave mouth, humans shouting, brandishing torches, throwing burning branches into the dark. The lions snarl, their eyes glowing as they pace. The cave resounds with echoes of defiance and rage. Perhaps on rare nights the humans succeeded, driving the beasts out, claiming the hollow of stone for themselves. But victory was never permanent. The lions would return. The war was unending. Speculation lingers. Could this relentless struggle for caves be the origin of our obsession with territory, with walls, with ownership? To claim space was never simple survival. It was defiance against predators who denied us shelter. Every hut built from mammoth bones, every stone wall raised by later civilizations, may trace its lineage back to those battles. The instinct to say, "This place is mine," might have been forged in caves lit by fire, contested by lions. In Chauvet Cave, some of the oldest art known to humanity shows lions etched in vivid detail, their bodies fluid, their gazes piercing. These were not casual sketches, they were portraits of rivals, acknowledgments of power. What if painting lions on cave walls was not decoration, but a form of spiritual contest? To inscribe their image was to stake a symbolic claim, to turn the space of lions into the space of humans. The walls became battlegrounds, not only of flesh, but of imagination. Now imagine the silence after such a victory. The humans sit within the cave, fire crackling, the night held at bay. Children sleep against their mothers, elders carve tools by firelight. But outside, roars echo across the plains. The empire of lions is not broken. It surrounds them still, waiting for weakness. Every flicker of flame is fragile, every night a wager against returning teeth. The war for shelter is never truly won. It is survived one night at a time. Science confirms this fragile balance. In cave after cave, layers of occupation show alternating eras. Lion, then human, then lion again. Sometimes the bones of both lie together, evidence of confrontations that ended in blood. The record is not one of conquest, but of uneasy coexistence, of a war measured not in triumph, but in survival. Speculative reflection whispers, could this endless contest explain our ancient reverence for lions as symbols of kingship, guardianship, divine power? In cultures across the world, from Mesopotamia to Africa to Europe, lions appear as emblems of rule, as creatures who guard sacred thresholds. Perhaps this reverence is not abstract, it is memory, the echo of caves defended and lost, of fires kindled against roars. To fight for shelter is to fight for existence itself. For humans, caves were not luxury. They were the line between warmth and freezing, between safety and annihilation. Every battle with lions was not only about stone walls, it was about survival of the species. In losing, we learned caution. In winning, we learned courage. And in both, we learned that space itself could be contested, claimed, defended. Imagine again the flicker of torchlight across stone walls. Humans paint lions not as defeated foes, but as ever-present rivals, as if acknowledging their power is itself a strategy for survival. The cave becomes more than a shelter. It becomes a shrine, a battlefield of memory, a place where human imagination wrestles with animal dominance. In this way, the war for shelter was not only physical, it was psychological, cultural, even spiritual. And so, the caves tell the story of nights where firelight barely held the dark, of roars that shook the stone, of human hands tracing lions on walls in defiance or reverence. The war for shelter was never about victory. It was about enduring, about holding space, however briefly, against the rulers of the age. In that struggle, fragile as it was, humanity carved the first outlines of its future. When humans first crossed into the vast lands of South America, they carried with them the scars of 1,000 dangers already faced, saber-tooths in the grass, hyenas at the cave mouths, lions prowling at the edge of firelight. Yet what awaited them here was something stranger, something more alien than any predator they had known before. In these new lands, the terror did not come on 4 legs, but on 2. They were called Forus racids, but history remembers them more vividly as terror birds, towering up to 10 feet tall, flightless yet swift, with legs like spring-loaded spears and beaks sharp enough to crush bone. Their skulls were enormous, their hooked bills designed not only to pierce but to hammer, to slam down with the force of a predator that had no need for claws. To stand before one was to stand before a bird-turned nightmare, a living relic of an older age. Imagine encountering such a creature for the first time. The plains stretch wide and empty, the air hot, the horizon shimmering. From a distance you see a figure moving, a bird, yes, but impossibly large, its stride long and unhurried. As it draws closer, you realize it is not prey but predator. Its eyes lock on you, unblinking, its head jerking with uncanny precision. Then, with a sudden burst, it runs, legs pounding the earth, faster than any human sprint. The beak descends, and bones shatter like twigs. For migrating humans, already fragile, already accustomed to fear, this must have been a new nightmare. Here was no beast of fur or fang, no predator of the old familiar kind. This was a bird that killed like a hammer, its strikes aimed at skulls, its movements jerky and alien. To face it was to face something that felt almost otherworldly. Fossil evidence tells us that terror birds dominated South America for millions of years, ruling the predator niche before big cats arrived. They hunted everything from small mammals to creatures the size of young horses. Their dominance was so complete that when humans entered their realm, they stepped directly into an empire long established. Just as lions ruled the caves of Europe, terror birds ruled the plains of the south. Speculation lingers. Could these encounters have given rise to myths of monstrous birds, of thunderous wings, and crushing beaks? Across human cultures, tales of giant birds abound, creatures that snatch people from the ground, that strike with unnatural force. Perhaps these are not mere inventions, but echoes of memories carried from the first migrations into South America, when humans looked up not only to the sky, but to predators that stalked on land with feathers and fury. Now imagine a band of humans at dawn, gathering near a river to drink. The sun is low, casting long shadows across the grass. Suddenly the birds appear, silent, swift, their beaks gleaming in the light. Panic erupts. The humans scatter, some diving into water, others fleeing into trees. But not all escape. One is caught, struck down, their skull shattered with a single blow. The birds feast quickly, their bills tearing flesh with efficiency. For the survivors, the message is clear. This land belongs to them. Science reveals that humans and terror birds did overlap, at least for a time. The exact encounters are lost to history, but bones tell part of the tale. Giant bird remains found alongside early human tools, hints that one species was learning to push back against another. Perhaps the birds did not fall easily, but eventually they fell. Speculative reflection suggests that the terror birds, like the lions and hyenas before them, forced humans into new strategies. To survive creatures faster than them, humans may have relied even more on cooperation, on tools, on fire. A single human could not outrun a terror bird, but a group, armed with spears and stones, could turn the tide. In facing these avian predators, perhaps humanity sharpened the very instincts that would later make it apex across continents. Picture another night, this time in South America. A group gathers around a fire, their voices low. In the distance, the silhouettes of giant birds move against the horizon, their heads jerking as they stalk the grass. The fire crackles, and for a moment, safety holds, but the fear is not gone. Every rustle, every shadow carries the possibility of those beaks descending, of bones breaking beneath a predator unlike any they had known before. Speculation reaches deeper. What if the terror birds seeded not only myths of giant predators, but also of the uncanny, creatures that defy expectation, that blur the line between bird and beast? Their form was familiar, yet distorted, a bird that could not fly, a bird that hunted flesh. In them, perhaps, humans first confronted the idea that the natural order could be twisted, that the world could produce monsters beyond imagination. And so, the terror birds of the South became part of the gauntlet humanity endured. They were reminders that migration was not escape, that new lands brought new nightmares. They were predators of strangeness, of alien shape and dreadful force, and in facing them, humanity once again learned to adapt, to resist, to endure. Migration has often been framed as triumph, humans moving outward, claiming new worlds, mastering new lands. But in the deep time of our early story, migration was less about mastery and more about escape. To move into a new land was not to find safety, but to discover a new gauntlet, a fresh array of predators waiting in ambush. No corner of earth was gentle, no horizon offered rest. Survival was a journey through teeth and claw, repeated endlessly, generation after generation. Picture a band of early humans crossing a mountain pass. Behind them lies a land already carved by lions, hyenas, and saber-tooths. Ahead stretches a valley they have never seen. Hope rises. They imagined rivers, game, shelter. But the first night proves otherwise. The air carries an unfamiliar roar, deep and guttural. Shadows move at the tree line, larger than anything they have known. They are not safe. They have only exchanged one set of predators for another. Science supports this grim rhythm. Wherever early humans traveled, they encountered ecosystems already dominated by apex predators. In Africa, lions, leopards, crocodiles, and hyenas. In Eurasia, cave bears, saber-tooths, and dire wolves. In the Americas, terror birds, giant short-faced bears, and jaguars. Each new territory was already claimed, each niche filled with predators perfected by millennia of evolution. Humans entered not as rulers, but as trespassers. Speculation lingers. What if this endless gauntlet is why we became so restless, so unwilling to remain still? Perhaps our instinct for exploration, our drive to push beyond every horizon, is not rooted only in curiosity but in fear, the memory that to stay too long was to be trapped, surrounded, consumed. The gauntlet was not a single trial, but a way of life. Imagine the exhaustion of such existence. Each day is a test. You scavenge a carcass, only to lose it to hyenas. You claim a cave, only to find claw marks of lions. You flee into the grass, only to be hunted by saber-tooths. Then, when you cross into new lands, you face birds taller than yourself, bears whose sheer size mocks your fragile bones. There is no rest, no corner of earth that offers peace. Every victory is temporary, every shelter borrowed, every fire fragile. And yet, perhaps this relentless gauntlet was the crucible of our becoming. To survive in such a world required more than strength. It required adaptability, imagination, cooperation. We learned to see danger before it arrived, to prepare for threats we had not yet faced. Perhaps the human gift of foresight, of dreaming beyond the present, was sharpened in this endless cycle of displacement and threat. Now picture a night on the edge of a foreign plain. Your band has crossed rivers, mountains, forests, and now rests by a new fire. You hope the predators of old are behind you, but as the fire burns low, you hear something new, a sound you cannot name, deep, rhythmic, a hunter's call. The children cry, the elders exchange fearful looks. You do not know this beast, but you know what it means. The gauntlet continues. Speculative reflection suggests that this cycle of discovery and fear seeded something enduring in us, the knowledge that safety is never permanent. Even today our myths are filled with monsters waiting beyond borders, beasts that lurk at the edges of the map. Could these be echoes of the Pleistocene, when every new horizon carried its own teeth? Science tells us that predators evolved differently in different lands, but the pattern was constant. In South America, terror birds and giant bears. In North America, dire wolves and saber-tooths. In Eurasia, cave lions and cave bears. In Africa, crocodiles and leopards. Each continent presented its own guardians, its own barriers. For humans, survival was never the story of conquering one predator. It was the story of facing many, over and over again, until at last we learned not only to endure, but to prevail. Imagine, for a moment, the psychological toll. Children raised in fear of one predator would grow, only to face new ones. Stories around the fire would shift, replacing the lion with the bird, the hyena with the bear. Fear was constant, but its shape changed with the land. Perhaps this is why our myths are so diverse, filled with dragons, giants, monsters of every form. Each culture carried the memory of the predators it had faced woven into story, passed down as lessons disguised as legend. And yet, the gauntlet also carried a strange gift. In forcing us into constant adaptation, it ensured that no single predator could break us. Each encounter sharpened our tools, strengthened our bonds, deepened our imaginations. To live in an endless gauntlet was to live in constant fear, yes, but also in constant invention. Speculation whispers, perhaps this is why humanity eventually rose above all rivals. No other creature faced such a wide array of predators across so many lands. Lions shaped us, hyenas tested us, saber-tooths hunted us, terror birds crushed us, crocodiles stalked us. Each demanded something new, each forged a piece of who we are. When at last the gauntlet ended, when predators fell one by one, humanity emerged not only as survivor, but as something transformed. Thus the endless gauntlet was both curse and blessing. It was the weight that nearly broke us, and the fire that tempered us. To walk through it was to know that no place on earth was safe, and yet, in surviving, we became a species unlike any other. Beyond the fangs and claws of the predators, another danger loomed across the ancient world. Vast herds of giants, animals so immense that their very presence reshaped the land. They were not hunters, yet they were no less perilous. To live among them was to live in the shadow of beings whose size alone could kill. Step onto a Pleistocene plain, and you will see them. Mammoths, their silhouettes like moving mountains, tusks curving pale against the horizon. Aurochs, wild cattle, larger and fiercer than any modern bull, horns gleaming like weapons, bison herds so immense they darkened the land, their thunderous movement a storm rolling across the earth. These were the giants of the plains, and wherever humans wandered, they were already there. For early humans, the giants were both threat and promise. Their bodies carried enough meat to feed an entire band for weeks, their hides thick enough to build shelters, their bones strong enough to shape into tools, but to approach them was to risk annihilation. A single misstep near a mammoth, and you could be trampled into the earth. A single charge from an aurochs, and your body would shatter like kindling. To hunt these giants alone was unthinkable. Science tells us that mammoths stood up to 13 feet tall at the shoulder, weighing as much as 10 tons. Their tusks could span 15 feet, capable of sweeping aside predators and humans alike. Aurochs, meanwhile, were wild cattle reaching nearly 7 feet at the shoulder, their temper as dangerous as their size. Even bison, less individually fearsome, were perilous in numbers. A panicked herd could crush everything in its path. Now imagine standing on the plain, a band of humans crouched low in the grass. Before you stretches a herd of mammoths, calves tucked between mothers, tusks glinting in the light. The wind carries their scent, musky and earthy, overwhelming your senses. You hold a sharpened spear, but in your heart you know it is not enough. One wrong move, and the herd will stampede. You are fragile, breakable, a shadow at the feet of giants. Speculation whispers, what if these encounters taught us the necessity of patience, of timing, of cooperation? To bring down such beasts required strategy beyond instinct. It was not brute force but planning that made the difference. Perhaps the roots of human ingenuity, the ability to imagine futures, to coordinate actions, to devise traps, were honed in the pursuit of giants too large for any one person to face. Archaeological evidence confirms that humans did hunt mammoths and aurochs, though rarely alone. Sites reveal bones marked by stone tools, tusks carved into weapons, hides used for shelter. These were not casual encounters. They were events, organized efforts of groups working in unison. A successful hunt could sustain life for weeks. A failed one could end it instantly. Imagine one such hunt. The band drives a small group of aurochs toward a ravine, shouting, waving fire, throwing stones. The beasts snort and bellow, their eyes wide, their hooves tearing the earth. At last, one misstep, falling into the trap. Spears descend, shouts echo, blood darkens the ground. The humans cheer, relief flooding their bodies, but around them lie the dangers of the attempt. Spears broken, bodies bruised, one hunter trampled and gone. Victory and loss entwined, survival bought with blood. Speculation extends further. Perhaps our reverence for cattle, our later domestication of aurochs into livestock, was rooted not only in utility but in memory. These animals were once both enemy and provider, creatures that demanded respect even as they fed us. To this day, bulls appear in myth as symbols of strength, of fury, of sacred power. Could these cultural echoes stretch back to those plains when survival depended on facing the horns of aurochs? Mammoths too shaped our imagination. Their bones formed the walls of ancient shelters, their tusks carved into art. To see such a creature was to see the embodiment of endurance, a being that moved like the earth itself. In their shadow, humans may have first grasped the scale of life, the vastness of nature's power. To bring one down was not merely a kill, it was a transformation of the world, turning mountain into meat, monument into sustenance. Now picture the aftermath of such a hunt. The air is filled with smoke from fires, the smell of roasting meat. Children laugh, elders carve bones, hides are stretched into shelters. The entire band feasts, their hunger sated, their bodies warmed. For a brief moment the world feels generous, and yet in the distance the herds still roam, immense and untouchable. The giants remain, reminders that such victories are rare, that survival is always provisional. Speculative reflection deepens. Could it be that our sense of community, of shared effort, of collective identity was forged in these hunts? Alone we were powerless. Together we could challenge even the giants. Perhaps the very concept of we, the bond that unites humans into societies, was born from the necessity of standing together against beasts that dwarfed us. Science supports this view. Cooperative hunting strategies, complex communication, division of labor all appear in the archaeological record alongside evidence of large animal hunts. To face the giants of the plains was to demand the highest level of coordination our species could muster. In those hunts, the seeds of culture itself may have been sown, and yet, even with strategy, the risk remained immense. For every successful kill, there were countless failures. Fossil records show broken bones in human remains, injuries consistent with trampling and goring. The giants were not passive prey. They were forces of nature, dangerous as any predator. To face them was to gamble with life. Speculation lingers. Perhaps this constant dance with giants explains our enduring fascination with them. Even long after their extinction, mammoths and aurochs linger in myth, in story, in the human imagination. We remember them not as beasts we conquered, but as adversaries who tested us, who demanded our ingenuity, who forced us to become more than we were. Thus the plains were not empty spaces of opportunity. They were arenas of peril, where giants roamed and humans survived only by wit, courage, and unity. To walk among them was to walk among mountains that moved, storms with horns, herds that could kill by accident as easily as predators killed by intent. They were the giants of the plains, and in their shadow humanity continued its fragile journey. In the shadow of giants, one truth became undeniable. No single human could stand alone. A solitary figure with a stone blade was nothing against a mammoth, an aurochs, or a charging bison. Strength did not lie in the individual. It lay in the swarm, in the group, in the collective, in the fragile bodies that moved together as one. Picture a hunting band gathered at dawn. The air is cold, mist rising from the ground, the horizon alive with the distant shapes of mammoths. Each human holds a spear, crude but sharpened, its point hardened by fire. Alone, each weapon is laughably small. Together they form a forest of points, a net of danger that even a giant might fear. This was survival by swarm. Humans learned to act not as scattered individuals, but as coordinated hunters. One group drove the herd toward a ravine. Another blocked escape. Others waited with spears poised. Shouts, gestures, fire, all became tools of synchronization. Success depended not on strength, but on unity, on the ability to move as one body, to think as one mind. Science confirms this transformation. Sites across Europe and Asia reveal evidence of coordinated hunts, entire herds of bison driven into traps, mammoths surrounded and attacked from all sides. Such feats were not accidents. They required planning, communication, foresight. In hunting giants, humans honed the skills that would one day build societies. Speculation lingers. What if this is where our sense of we was truly born? The idea that one life is tied to many, that survival is not an individual achievement, but a collective one. To face the giants was to understand interdependence. Alone, you died. Together, you endured. Now imagine the scene of a hunt in motion. Dozens of humans circle a herd of aurochs. They shout, wave fire, close in slowly. The aurochs bellow, horns slashing, eyes wide with fury. One charges, scattering hunters, but the swarm closes again. Spears striking, stones flying. It is chaos, but it is coordinated chaos, shaped by shared intention. When at last the beast falls, the cry that rises is not from one throat, but from many. The victory belongs to all, and in that moment something else is born. Celebration, sharing, ritual. The kill is divided among the band, every piece used, every part valued. The feast is not only sustenance, but affirmation of unity. Around the fire stories are told, songs perhaps begun, the memory of the hunt woven into identity. The swarm does not only survive, it creates meaning. Speculative reflection suggests that this may be the root of our storytelling impulse. To coordinate, humans needed to share knowledge, to imagine together, to rehearse actions before they occurred. Stories became strategy, a way of preparing minds for what lay ahead. And later, when the hunt was over, stories became memory, teaching, myth. Perhaps the very foundations of language itself were sharpened in the swarm, in the need to synchronize many fragile bodies against a single giant. But the swarm carried costs as well. To rely on the group meant to surrender individuality, to accept risk for the sake of others. Injuries were common. Hunters trampled, gored, maimed. Yet even here, cooperation deepened. Evidence of healed bones in ancient skeletons shows that injured individuals were cared for by their groups. The swarm did not abandon its wounded. It carried them, fed them, kept them alive. In this way, compassion itself may have been born, not sentiment, but strategy that grew into something greater. Imagine an elder, once strong, now slowed by injury, sitting by the fire. Younger hunters bring them marrow-rich bones, share meat, tend wounds. The elder tells stories of past hunts, of strategies that worked, of mistakes to avoid. In this exchange, the swarm preserves knowledge across generations. The elder's body is fragile, but their memory keeps the band alive. Here, too, survival by swarm becomes more than defense. It becomes culture. Speculation whispers further. Could the swarm instinct explain why humans alone among primates built vast societies, civilizations, nations? Other animals cooperate in small groups, but only humans swarm in millions, even billions, united by symbols, stories, and shared identity. Perhaps this capacity was forged on the plains, when fragile bands faced giants and learned that survival demanded not just cooperation, but deep binding trust. Now picture the silence after a hunt. The fire burns low, meat crackles, children sleep, and the hunters sit in reflection. They are weary, but they are alive. Each knows that without the others, they would not have survived. Each knows that the swarm is more than the sum of its parts. The giants still roam, immense and dangerous, but for tonight the humans endure, not as individuals, but as one. Science adds weight to this vision. Cooperative hunting left marks in the archaeological record. Specialized tools, coordinated kill sites, shared shelters. Even genetic studies suggest bottlenecks, where small groups endured only by intense cooperation. Survival by swarm was not an option. It was the only path forward. Speculative reflection lingers at the edge. Perhaps this is why loneliness feels so unbearable to us. Perhaps in the deep past, to be alone was to be doomed, to be cut off from the swarm that gave life. The need for connection, for belonging, may not be cultural alone. It may be survival written into our very bones. And so survival by swarm became the human way. It was not the strongest who endured, but the most cooperative, not the fiercest individual, but the tightest group. Against the giants of the plains, humans learned the secret that would carry them through every trial to come, that together fragile beings could become a force greater than any predator, greater even than the giants themselves. For early humans, danger did not end at the tree line or the cave mouth. It stretched into the rivers, the marshes, the lakes that promised life but often delivered death. To drink, to bathe, to cross a stream was not a simple act. It was a gamble, a wager made with unseen jaws lurking just beneath the surface. The shadow of crocodiles stretched across every water's edge, a reminder that even thirst was a risk. Imagine a river at dawn. Mist curls low over the surface, the water glistening with the first light of the sun. Birds cry, fish leap, the air feels calm. A small band of humans approaches cautiously, driven by thirst after a day of travel. They kneel at the bank, hands cupped, lips lowering toward the cool water. And then, without warning, the surface explodes. A shape vast and violent surges upward, jaws gaping, teeth gleaming. In an instant, one is dragged beneath. The water closes, the ripples fade, and silence returns. Only a patch of blood remains to mark the loss. The crocodiles of the Pleistocene were larger than most alive today. In Africa, Crocodilus thorbjarnarsoni reached lengths of nearly 27 feet, dwarfing even the Nile crocodiles we know. In Asia and Australia, saltwater crocodiles stretched nearly as long, ruling coastlines and rivers with unmatched patience. These creatures were not merely predators. They were ambush incarnate, living traps with jaws strong enough to crush bone and limbs capable of dragging a full-grown human into the depths. For humans, rivers were lifelines. They gave water, food, travel routes, but every approach carried dread. Fossil evidence shows crocodiles preyed upon early hominins, their bones marked by teeth, their remains discovered in ancient riverbeds. To survive near water, humans had to become hyper-aware, learning to read the subtle signs, the floating log that was not a log, the ripple that was not the wind, the silence that hid a waiting shadow. Speculation whispers, what if this constant danger shaped our very relationship with water? Across cultures, rivers are places of both life and death, sacred yet feared. Myths speak of river monsters, serpents, dragons that lurk in depths. Perhaps these are not inventions but memories, echoes of a time when every shoreline was haunted by predators that claimed our ancestors. Picture the psychology of such fear. At night, as humans camp near a river, they hear the splash of unseen movement, the grunt of a reptile in the dark. Sleep is uneasy, firelight flickers against the water, and every dream carries the image of jaws opening below. To live in such a world was to never be at ease, to know that even in quenching thirst, death might rise from beneath. And yet humans could not avoid rivers. They were too essential, too deeply woven into survival. So adaptation followed. Groups began to approach water in shifts, some keeping watch while others drank. Spears were held at the ready, eyes scanning constantly. Over time, strategies evolved. Fires lit near banks, water carried in skins to reduce risk, crossings planned at shallows where visibility was better. The crocodiles forced vigilance, caution, and eventually ingenuity. Science tells us that crocodiles are among the oldest predators on Earth, survivors from the age of dinosaurs. They endured mass extinctions, climate shifts, and evolutionary upheavals. For millions of years, they hunted unchanged, their design too perfect to improve upon. To face them was to face time itself, predators older than humanity, older than the very species that walked the earth. Speculation that deepens. Could it be that our fear of the unseen, of what lies beneath, was sharpened by these encounters? Even today, many people feel unease in dark water, in lakes or rivers where the bottom cannot be seen. Perhaps this is no accident, but an inheritance, a survival instinct passed down from nights on Pleistocene riverbanks, where one careless step meant death. Now imagine another scene. A group attempts to cross a wide river, carrying children and tools on their backs. Halfway across, the water churns. A crocodile lunges, massive jaws clamping onto a leg. Screams echo, spears strike wildly, but the predator is relentless. It drags its prey into a death roll, twisting, pulling, vanishing into the murk. The group reaches the far side shaken, diminished, scarred, and still the journey must continue. Speculative reflection suggests that such losses may have carved themselves into story. Myths of river gods demanding sacrifice, of creatures that pull the unwary beneath, may all trace to the reality of crocodile ambush. To approach water was always ritualized, caution, watchfulness, reverence. In some ways, rivers became sacred precisely because they were dangerous. But in time, as with every predator, humans learned to push back. Spears were used not only to defend, but to strike preemptively. Fires were set at fords, deterring ambush. In later ages, traps were built, crocodiles hunted for their hides and meat. The shadow of crocodiles was never erased, but it was diminished. Slowly humans turned fear into strategy, survival into mastery. And yet, the memory remains. Even today, crocodiles kill hundreds each year. They are reminders that we have not fully escaped the Pleistocene, that some shadows linger still. To stand by a riverbank, to feel unease at the water's edge, is to hear the echo of our ancestors, fragile, thirsty, wary of what lurked beneath. Thus the shadow of crocodiles was more than a threat. It was a teacher, forcing vigilance, shaping myths, carving fear into bone. They were predators, not only of flesh, but of imagination, haunting every approach to water, and in their presence, humanity once again learned that survival meant caution, cooperation, and the ability to see danger where it hid. Water to our ancestors was never only a gift. It was a bargain, a place of risk where the line between life and death thinned. Rivers quenched thirst, carried fish, and marked the paths of migration, but they also concealed jaws, scales, and sudden violence. Kneel by the water's edge was to accept a wager, life sustained or life taken. Imagine a night beside a riverbank. The fire burns low, its glow faint against the rippling surface. Children sleep close to their mothers. Hunters sharpen tools. Across the dark water, something moves, silent, vast, unseen beneath the surface. The humans do not see it, but they feel it, a tension in the air, a knowledge older than words. They drink in shifts, never all at once, never without watchful eyes fixed on the shadows of the river. For in the water waits death, scaled and patient. The crocodiles of the Pleistocene were not alone in ruling these waters. Giant gharials with long slender jaws slid through rivers in Asia, while alligators dominated wetlands in the Americas. Each continent offered its own forms of aquatic predators, creatures evolved to strike from the unseen. Together, they ensured that humans were never safe, even in the act of drinking. Predators did not only own the plains, the caves, the forests, they owned the water too. Speculation suggests that this relentless threat gave rise to myths of river monsters, serpents, dragons, beings of scale and shadow that pull the unwary into depths. Across cultures, the theme is constant. In Mesopotamia, Tiamat, the serpent of the deep. In Norse tales, Jormungandr, the world serpent coiled beneath oceans. In countless African traditions, river spirits with jaws like beasts. Perhaps these are not separate inventions, but echoes of a single memory, the terror of crouching at a riverbank, the knowledge that something ancient and merciless waits just beneath. Now picture a crossing. A band must ford a wide, slow river to reach the hunting grounds beyond. They link arms, stepping carefully into the current. Midway, the water erupts. A crocodile, 20 feet long, surges upward, jaws clamping onto a hunter's torso. The scream is cut short as the predator twists, dragging them down in a spiral of foam and blood. Panic spreads. Some flee back to shore, others freeze, children cry. By the time the river calms, one life is gone, and the survivors know the water has claimed its due. Science confirms such encounters. Fossil evidence reveals human bones marked by crocodile teeth, skeletons found in ancient riverbeds where predators fed. Even today, crocodiles and alligators kill hundreds each year, striking in the same way they struck our ancestors, sudden, silent, final. Their hunting strategy has not changed in millions of years because it never needed to. Ambush from the water's edge remains one of the most efficient forms of predation ever evolved. Speculative reflection deepens. What if humanity's unease with dark water, with murky rivers and lakes, is not irrational but ancestral memory? Even in modern times, people speak of monsters in lakes, Nessie in Scotland, Champ in America, serpents in countless traditions. These may not be fabrications but echoes, cultural fossils of nights when every splash in the dark carried mortal danger. To imagine a monster in the depths is, in truth, to remember what the depths once held. But the terror of water went beyond predators alone. Floods drowning, the sheer unknowable vastness of rivers and seas added to the sense of danger. When predators, like crocodiles, inhabited those same waters, they became symbols of nature's duality, life-giving and life-taking, sacred and cursed. To drink was ritualized with caution. To cross was preceded by prayer or story. To bathe was done in groups, never alone. Survival demanded ritual, and ritual gave birth to myth. Now imagine a mother leading her child to drink. She holds them back, scanning the surface, waiting, watching. Only when the silence feels safe does she allow them to kneel. Even then, she keeps a hand on their shoulder, ready to pull them away at the first ripple. The child drinks, eyes wide with fear. Later, around the fire, they will hear the story of the river beast, the devourer of the careless. The story is not mere imagination, it is instruction, survival disguised as myth. Speculation lingers. Could these experiences have seeded our deep association of water with the unknown, with spirits and deities? Many of the world's oldest religions place gods or monsters in rivers and seas. Perhaps this reflects not abstract philosophy, but practical memory. To our ancestors, water was never neutral. It was alive, inhabited, dangerous. To survive, they treated it with reverence, awe, and fear. Yet, as always, humanity adapted. Spears were used to test shallows, children forbidden to approach water without elders, fires set to light fords at night. In some places, groups began to hunt the hunters, turning crocodiles into prey, using their hides for armor, their meat for sustenance. Slowly the myth shifted from river monsters that could not be challenged to predators that could be resisted. Fear became knowledge, knowledge became strategy. Still the memory endures. Even now, when we swim in murky lakes or wade in rivers, a flicker of unease rises. Something unseen, something beneath. The shadow of ancient crocodiles lingers in our blood. A whisper from the Pleistocene that death in the water is never far away. Thus, myths of river monsters may not be fantasy at all, but the truest stories we carry. Memories written in fear, shaped by predators who ruled both land and water. To drink was to risk, to cross was to gamble, to survive was to remember. And in that memory, humanity carried forward not only fear, but wisdom, the understanding that the world was never safe, and that survival meant seeing danger, even where it could not be seen. If myths are whispers of fear carried forward in story, bones are the evidence carved into stone and marrow, the proof that humans were not always hunters, but prey. Across caves, riverbeds, and ancient plains, archaeologists have uncovered the silent testimony of our fragility. Human remains gnawed, shattered, and scored by teeth. Our story is not only written in the tools we left behind, but in the predators who left their marks upon us. Imagine standing in a cave mouth where archaeologists dig carefully through layers of sediment. Stone flakes appear, remnants of tools once held by fragile hands. Charcoal flecks signal ancient fires, and then something darker. A human femur, split and cracked, its surface etched with tooth marks, not cut by stone, not broken by accident, torn by jaws. The predator is long gone, but its signature remains, inscribed into the very bones of those it consumed. Science tells us these marks are widespread. In South Africa's caves, the fossil record of early hominins reveals skulls punctured by leopard teeth. In European caves, bones bear the crushing imprints of hyenas, lions, and wolves. In Asia, crocodiles left grooves across skeletons dragged into riverbeds. Again and again, the message is the same. We were hunted. We were meals. The earth holds our story not only in tools and art, but in predators' teeth. Speculation whispers, what if this knowledge never left us? Even without science, our ancestors must have understood. They saw the bodies torn, the bones left behind, the blood carried into the grass. They must have told stories about those who did not return, about the places where predators waited, about the dangers that turned life to death in an instant. In those stories, the memory of the hunted lived on. Now imagine the fear of returning to a camp and finding it silent. No fire burns, no voices rise. Scattered remains lie in the grass, bones broken, skulls crushed. The marks are clear. Predators came in the night. For the survivors, grief mingles with terror. They are not only mourners, they are witnesses to their place in the order of life. They understand that they are not untouchable. They are fragile, vulnerable prey. Archaeological sites reveal patterns that deepen this truth. In some caves, human remains are found layered beneath animal bones, as though predators carried both into the same den. In others, entire groups appear to have been attacked, their remains scattered and broken. These were not isolated accidents. They were the rhythm of existence, repeated generation after generation. To be human in the Pleistocene was to live with the knowledge that death might come not by age or illness, but by claw and tooth. Speculative reflection stretches further. Could this constant presence of predation have shaped our psychology more deeply than we realize? The anxiety that grips us in darkness, the paranoia that rises in silence, the instinct to look over our shoulder, all may be echoes of bones scattered across plains and caves, reminders that once we were hunted without mercy. Fear was not an aberration, it was inheritance, carved into our minds as surely as teeth carved into bone. Picture the aftermath of such loss around a fire. Survivors sit in silence, staring into flames. An elder lifts a bone, scarred by teeth, and holds it before the group. They tell the story of the one who fell, not only as memory, but as warning. The bone becomes more than remains. It becomes a relic, a teaching, a reminder etched into flesh and carried into story. In this way, the bones of the hunted were not only the evidence of death, they were the foundation of wisdom. Science reinforces this. The frequency of predator marks on hominin fossils suggests a long history of conflict. For millions of years before we became apex hunters, we were caught in a cycle of predation. The survival of our species was not inevitable. It was fragile, contingent, a narrow thread stretched across endless threats. Each bone marked by teeth is a testament to those who did not survive, and to the thin line by which we did. Speculation deepens. Perhaps this is why human cultures across the world treat bones with reverence, burying them, painting them, building rituals around them. To see a bone was not only to see death, it was to see the possibility of predation, the reminder of fragility. By honoring bones, by keeping them safe, humans may have sought to reclaim control over what predators had once taken. The burial of the dead may have been, in part, an act of defiance against the predators who once scattered our remains. Now imagine walking into a cave where hyenas once ruled. The floor is littered with bones, antelope, horses, humans. Each bears the same marks, the same crushing imprints of teeth. To stand there is to see the equality of prey, to understand that in the eyes of predators, humans were no different from deer or bison. We were simply another meal. Speculative reflection lingers. Could this realization have shaped our later hunger for dominance? To have been prey for so long may have planted a seed of vengeance, a drive not only to survive, but to overturn the order, to become the hunters instead. The bones of the hunted were not only scars, they were sparks, igniting a determination to ensure that we would never again be only meat in another's jaws. And yet, even in that determination, the memory endured. The bones remind us still, in museum cases and excavation sites, in the marks etched by predators long gone. They whisper the truth of our past, that we were fragile, that we were hunted, that our story was written not only by our hands but by the teeth of those who fed on us. Fear is often dismissed as weakness, as something to be overcome, but in the long prehistory of our species, fear was not weakness, it was the teacher. Fear sharpened our senses, widened our eyes, stilled our breath in silence. It forced us to imagine danger before it struck, to see patterns where others saw only shadows, to adapt faster than any rival. Fear was not merely an emotion, it was survival, the invisible fire that burned in every hunted human. Imagine the silence of a camp on the open plain. The fire has burned it down to embers. The night presses close, and every rustle in the grass tightens the chest, quickens the breath. The humans huddle close, spears in hand, children pressed against their mothers. They do not know if danger is truly there, but their bodies respond as though it is. Heart pounding, muscles tense, eyes wide, they wait. The predator may come, or it may not, but fear prepares them for either. Science supports this. The human brain is wired with a hyperactive threat detection system, attuned to the faintest sounds, the smallest movements. Neuropsychologists call it a negativity bias, our tendency to give more attention to potential threats than to neutral or positive signals. This bias is not maladaptive. It is ancestral memory, the product of millions of years spent as prey. Those who underestimated danger died. Those who feared endured. Speculation deepens. Perhaps intelligence itself is born of fear. To imagine what is not yet real, to see danger before it strikes, to anticipate outcomes, requires imagination, foresight, the very seeds of thought. In this way, predators may have forged the human mind. Every claw in the dark, every tooth in the bone, every rustle in the grass demanded that humans think faster, plan further, imagine deeper than their rivals. Fear was the crucible of intelligence. Now imagine a child crouched at the edge of a cave, listening to the sounds of the night. They ask their elder about the growl they heard, the shadow they saw. The elder tells a story of lions, of hyenas, of crocodiles. The story is not only entertainment, it is instruction, embedding fear into memory, teaching vigilance through tale. Storytelling itself may have grown from fear, a way to encode survival lessons into narrative, passed from one generation to the next. Archaeological evidence supports this connection. Cave paintings often depict predators, lions, bears, mammoths, not merely prey animals for food, but the very creatures that threatened survival. To paint them was not only to honor or fear them, it was to remember, to warn, to teach. The walls themselves became lessons in vigilance, fear transformed into art, art transformed into knowledge. Speculative reflection stretches further. Could even religion have its roots in fear? To live in a world filled with predators was to live in constant uncertainty, where death could strike at any moment. To make sense of this, humans may have imagined forces beyond the visible, spirits or gods that embodied danger. By giving fear a name, they gave it meaning, and by giving it meaning, they gained the illusion of control. Fear became ritual, ritual became belief, belief became culture. Now picture a group around the fire, recounting a story of a child taken by a crocodile. The tale grows in the telling. The crocodile becomes a monster, a spirit of the river, a being that punishes the careless. The story spreads, shaping behavior for generations. Children learn not to drink at dusk, not to wander alone by rivers. Fear becomes wisdom, codified in myth. In this way, predators long dead still hunted us through story, shaping our actions long after the jaws were gone. Science reveals another truth. Fear drives learning. Experiments show that humans and animals alike learn fastest when danger is present. The brain sharpens, memory deepens, reflexes quicken. In the Pleistocene, this meant that fear was not merely reaction, it was accelerator. Those who feared best learned best. Those who learned best survived. Speculation lingers. Perhaps even our social bonds are born of fear. To live in constant threat meant no one could survive alone. Fear drove humans together, bound them into groups, taught them to trust, to communicate, to protect one another. Compassion may have begun not as love, but as fear of loss. Cooperation not comfort, was the antidote to predators. Imagine again the firelight, shadows flickering on stone. A predator roars in the distance. The group presses closer, hands on one another's shoulders, comfort found in closeness. Fear binds them, but it also strengthens them. It is in that binding, in that shared dread, that society is born. Speculative reflection grows darker. Could it be that our modern anxieties, our restlessness, our paranoia, our unease in silence, are not flaws but echoes? That the same fear that once kept us alive now lingers in a world where predators are gone, leaving us haunted by instincts we cannot extinguish? The hunted body remains, even in an age where the hunters are no more. And yet, in fear lies resilience. To imagine danger is also to imagine defense. To anticipate threat is also to anticipate opportunity. Fear taught us to see beyond the moment, to shape tools, to build fires, to create shelters. It was the soil in which intelligence grew, the spark that lit innovation. Without fear, we might never have become human at all. Thus the lessons of fear are etched into our minds as deeply as tooth marks are etched into ancient bones. Fear shaped our intelligence, sharpened our imagination, bound us into groups, gave rise to our myths, our rituals, our very sense of self. It was not weakness, it was wisdom, the inheritance of prey that one day became predator. For millions of years, humans lived in the shadow of predators. Our bones gnawed and scattered across caves and plains. But then came a spark, small at first, fragile, fleeting, a flicker of flame that turned the night from terror into shelter. Fire was not our invention in the beginning. We found it in lightning strikes, in wildfires that swept across dry grass, in embers smoldering after storms. Yet once we touched it, once we carried it, once we learned to feed it, fire became the turning point in the war for survival. Imagine the first time. A band huddled in darkness, predators circling unseen, the air heavy with fear. Then lightning cracks across the sky, setting a tree ablaze. The humans draw near, eyes wide, bodies trembling. The heat singes, the smoke chokes, but they sense something deeper. Predators keep their distance. Eyes glimmer in the dark, but do not approach. The flame is danger, but it is also safety. In its glow, humanity finds its first fragile edge against extinction. Science tells us that controlled use of fire stretches back nearly 1 million years, with evidence of hearths discovered in caves across Africa and Eurasia. Charcoal, burned bones, layers of ash, all trace the presence of fire tended, carried, preserved. This was no accident. It was the first technology, the first great equalizer against fangs and claws. Speculation whispers, what did it feel like that first night with fire? To sit by its warmth, to watch the shadows retreat, to hear predators pacing beyond the glow, but not daring to approach? Fear remained, but it changed. It no longer paralyzed. It became vigilance sharpened by light, by flame. For the first time, humans had a circle of safety in the darkness, however small, however fragile. Picture the fire at the mouth of a cave. Flames leap, sparks rise, smoke curls into the night. Around it humans sit close, faces glowing orange. Beyond lion's prowl, eyes reflecting in the dark, but they do not cross the boundary. The fire hisses, crackles, roars, and in its sound there is power. For the first time, humans can rest without constant terror. For the first time, they dream. And with fire came more than safety. It brought warmth in cold nights, light in endless dark, cooked food that nourished the body more deeply than raw flesh ever could. The energy of fire gave humans more than protection. It gave strength, health, time. Stronger bodies, longer lives, sharper minds, all were fed by flame. Speculative reflection deepens. Perhaps fire did not only shield us from predators, but also from despair. Before flame, nights were endless, filled with sounds that threatened and silences that suffocated. With fire, night became a place of gathering, of story, of community. Around flames, humans shared tales, taught lessons, bound themselves closer. Fire was more than survival. It was culture, born in light against the dark. Science confirms this. Archaeological hearths show patterns of repeated use, the same spots kindled again and again, generation after generation. Fire was carried from place to place, protected like life itself. Ash deposits reveal cooking. Smoke-charred bones reveal feasts. In every flame, the story of survival burned. Now imagine the psychological shift. For millions of years, humans had been prey, their lives dominated by fear. But with fire, the balance tipped. The hunted gained a weapon that predators could not challenge. The night was no longer ruled by roars and growls. It was ruled by the crackle of flame. In that circle of light, humanity began to see itself not as victim, but as something more. Speculation lingers. Could fire have been the first god, to see it leap and dance, to feel its heat, to know its power to protect and destroy? It must have seemed alive. Humans fed it wood, nurtured it, guarded it as though it were a spirit. Perhaps the first rituals were not prayers to the sky, but offerings to flame. Fire became more than tool, it became symbol, the heart of the camp, the guardian of life, the power of survival. Picture the dawn after such a night. The fire still smolders, embers glowing faintly. Humans stir, stretch, and rise, bodies rested, spirits calmer. They step beyond the cave, into a world still dangerous, but something has changed. They carry with them the light of fire, the memory of safety, the promise that they need not be prey forever. Science suggests this transformation was profound. Cooked food allowed nutrients to be absorbed more efficiently, fueling brain growth. Extended daylight from firelight gave time for planning, teaching, and story. Predators grew wary of human camps, the glow of fire marking territory they dared not cross. Fire was not simply a turning point. It was the moment survival began to tilt toward dominance. Speculative reflection extends further. Could it be that the very rhythm of human life, work by day, gather by night, was born from fire? Around it we became storytellers, singers, artists. Flame was the first stage upon which culture performed. In its glow, shadows danced, faces flickered, and imagination found fuel. Fire was not only the great equalizer, it was the great awakener. And yet fire was fragile. To lose it was disaster. Without flame, humans fell back into darkness, into fear. Every ember was precious, carried carefully from camp to camp, guarded like treasure. For fire was not easily made in the beginning. It was found, preserved, protected. Entire migrations may have depended on a single ember, wrapped in ash, a single spark that kept fear at bay. Now imagine the desperation of losing fire. A storm quenches the flame, rain soaks the embers. The night closes in. Predators draw near. The band trembles. In such moments, humans must have understood the fragility of their power. Fire was the turning point, but it was not yet mastery. It was a gift, tenuous and conditional, one that could vanish in an instant. Still, the lesson remained. With fire, humanity glimpsed its future. For the first time, survival was not only reaction, but defense, not only endurance, but strategy. Fire gave us space to think, to rest, to grow. It was the equalizer that taught us we did not need to remain prey. Thus, the story of fire is the story of transformation. the moment when the hunted found its first shield, when the darkness was pushed back, when humanity's fragile spark began to burn brighter than the predators who once ruled the night. The first shield humanity ever knew was fragile, flickering, alive with a strange rhythm that seemed both natural and supernatural. Fire was warmth, safety, protection, but it was also mystery, unpredictable and untouchable, beautiful and dangerous. It could save and it could destroy. It consumed wood, danced without form, reached upward like it hungered for the sky. To the earliest humans, fire must have seemed more than a tool. It must have seemed a being. Imagine the silence of a cave at night. In the center burns a fire, its light painting the walls with living shadows. The flames crackle and hiss, sparks leaping like voices, smoke curling upward as if carrying prayers to unseen realms. Around it, humans sit in awe. They do not yet have names for gods, but in the flicker of flame they see something more than themselves. The predators pace outside, eyes glinting in the dark, but they do not cross into the circle. The fire holds them back. The fire protects, and so the fire is worshipped. Speculation suggests that fire may have been humanity's first god, an elemental presence that shaped behavior, demanded reverence, and inspired ritual. It was fed offerings of wood, tended carefully, kept alive as though it had spirit. To neglect it was to risk death. To nurture it was to preserve life. Fire was not merely used, it was honored. Science gives us glimpses of this reverence. Hearths were not haphazard piles of ash. They were central places, arranged, maintained, revisited across generations. Some caves show repeated use of the same fire pit for centuries, evidence that flame was more than practical necessity. It was the heart of the camp, the center of existence. In its light, humans may have found their first sense of sacred space. Speculative reflection deepens. Could the very idea of ritual, of feeding, tending, offering, have begun with fire? To keep it alive required constant attention. Wood had to be gathered, embers stirred, flames shielded from wind and rain. In return, fire gave warmth, safety, and life. This reciprocal relationship resembles worship. Humans serving flame, flame sustaining humans. The bond was primal, sacred, unbreakable. Picture the ritual of rekindling. A storm extinguishes the fire, plunging the band into terror. For hours they sit in darkness, predators pressing close. Then, with desperate effort, sparks are struck, embers coaxed, flame reborn. The humans cheer, not only in relief but in reverence. They have brought the fire back from death. They have resurrected their protector. Perhaps they believed it chose to return, that it willed itself alive again. In such moments, the line between survival and faith blurred. Fire's dual nature, giver of life, bringer of death, only deepened its divinity. Left untended, it could leap into fury, devouring shelters, consuming forests, turning safety into annihilation. To early humans, this unpredictability must have felt godlike, benevolent when nurtured, wrathful when neglected. Fire was not fully theirs. It was a power they could borrow but never own. Speculative echoes stretch into later myth. Across cultures, fire is divine. In Greek legend, Prometheus steals it from the gods. In Hindu tradition, Agni is the flame, the messenger to the heavens. In Zoroastrian temples, eternal fires burn as symbols of purity. Even in the Bible, God appears as fire, a burning bush, a pillar of flame. Perhaps these myths are not inventions but memories, carried forward from the deep past when humans first sat before a fire and saw in it the face of power. Now imagine the teaching of a child. An elder places their hand close to the flame, showing its warmth, warning of its burn. They speak softly, telling the child that the fire is alive, that it must be respected, that it is both friend and danger. The lesson is not science, it is reverence. The child learns not only caution, but awe. They grow to see the fire as guardian, as presence, as spirit. Science supports this sense of centrality. Archaeological sites reveal fire as the nucleus of human gatherings, tools clustered around hearths, bones discarded in rings near flames, art painted in spaces lit only by torchlight. The evidence suggests that fire was the axis around which life revolved, shaping not only survival but imagination. Speculative reflection lingers. Perhaps even our sense of time was born from fire. Day was ruled by the sun, night by the flame. To watch embers fade into ash was to measure hours. To see sparks leap into darkness was to feel the passage of moments. Fire gave rhythm to life, marking the boundary between safety and peril, between light and dark, between life and death. Picture again the fire in the cave. Shadows dance on the walls, forming shapes that shift and move. A hunter gestures to the flickering shapes, telling a story of lions, of mammoths, of the hunt. The flames animate the tale, turning memory into performance, performance into myth. Fire is not only light, it is theater, teacher, priest. It transforms stone walls into canvases, silence into song, and so fire became symbol. It was humanity's shield, but also its mirror, reflecting back the truth of fragility, the power of unity, the possibility of transcendence. In fire, humans glimpsed something beyond themselves, the first God, the first force they could touch, yet never control, the first mystery that bound fear into reverence. Speculation lingers one step further. Perhaps fire was not only worshipped but loved. Its warmth comforted, its glow calmed, its presence reassured. To sit by fire was to feel less alone, less fragile, less hunted. In its company, humans began to dream not only of survival, but of something greater, of stories, of spirits, of futures. Fire was not merely flame, it was possibility. Thus the first god was not of sky or sea, but of earth itself, born in sparks and embers, carried in ash, fed with wood, tended with devotion. Fire was our guardian, our destroyer, our teacher. It was the God that lived among us, the light in the darkness, the heart of humanity's first circle of safety. If fire was our shield, then weapons were our first true swords. With them, humanity stepped into a new phase of its existence, not only hiding, not only warding off the dark, but pushing back. The predators of the Pleistocene were vast and terrible, their teeth sharper, their muscles stronger, their speed unmatched. Against them, a human hand was nothing, but a human hand with a sharpened stick, a stone shaped to an edge, that was the beginning of resistance. Imagine the first spear, a branch stripped of bark, hardened in flame, its tip honed against rough stone. Held in the trembling hand of a hunter, it looks almost laughable beside the saber-tooth's jaws or the lion's claws. But when thrust in unison, when wielded by many, it becomes more than wood. It becomes strategy made solid, thought turned into survival. Archaeology offers glimpses of these beginnings. The Schöningen spears of Germany, nearly 300,000 years old, are among the oldest known hunting weapons, carefully carved from spruce, balanced for throwing. Stone axes and hand axes, shaped by steady hands, date back even further, over 1 million years in Africa, tools that split bone, cut flesh, and perhaps defended against predators. These artifacts tell a story of minds that saw in raw material more than nature. They saw possibility. Speculative reflection suggests that every predator encounter forced innovation. A lion's ambush drives a group to sharpen sticks. A hyena raid inspires traps of stone and pit. A crocodile's strike at the riverbank leads to spears kept ready at the water's edge. Fear, once again, shapes intelligence, but now it forges it into matter, into weaponry. Each new threat leaves behind not only scars but solutions. Picture a scene on the plains. A herd of aurochs grazes in the distance, massive and dangerous. The humans gather, each carrying a stone-tipped spear. They advance slowly, fanning out, surrounding, driving the herd toward marshy ground where movement slows. The aurochs bellow, charge, one man is struck down, but the others thrust together, their spears finding flesh. The beast falls, and for the first time humans taste victory, not through scavenging, but through conquest. The weapon has shifted the balance. Science supports this trajectory. Cut marks on animal bones reveal not only scavenging, but active hunting, coordinated kills using tools. The shift is profound. No longer did humans wait for predators to feed first. With weapons, they became participants in the hunt, rivals in the struggle for dominance. Speculation lingers. Could weapons have reshaped not only survival, but identity? To wield a spear is to feel agency, to know that one is not powerless. The hunted begins to imagine themselves as hunter. This change is not only physical, it is psychological. Each sharpened blade was a step away from fear and a step toward ambition. Now imagine the crafting of these tools. A figure sits by the fire, striking stone against stone, flakes flying. Hours pass as the edge takes shape, each strike deliberate, each shard discarded. Others watch, learning the rhythm, the technique. In this moment, knowledge is born, not only survival knowledge, but craft, tradition, mastery. The tool is not only a weapon, it is memory passed from hand to hand. Speculative reflection deepens. Perhaps this was the first time humans began to see themselves as shapers of the world. Before weapons, we lived within nature's order. With weapons, we began to alter it. Stone, wood, fire, these became extensions of the human body, amplifying strength, reach, and courage. In crafting tools, humanity declared that the world could be remade. But weapons did more than kill. They created equality. A single human could not match a lion, but a dozen with spears could. A child with a sling could drive off a predator. An elder with an axe could defend the fire. The weapon democratized survival, spreading power across the group. In this way, tools bound humans closer, each relying on the other, each responsible for the safety of all. Picture a hyena raid at night. The predators circle, eyes glowing, laughter echoing in the dark. But this time, the humans rise with spears and axes. They shout, throw, strike. One hyena falls, the others retreat. The camp survives. Around the fire there is celebration, relief, pride. The tool has turned prey into defender. For the first time, humans taste what it means not only to endure but to resist. Science records this shift as the dawn of hunting cultures. From Africa to Europe, stone tools grow more sophisticated, weapons more specialized, spears designed for thrusting, blades for cutting, axes for chopping. Each refinement carries with it a story of trial, error, and necessity. Each carries the echo of predators overcome, of prey, animals slain, of survival secured. Speculative echoes stretch further. Perhaps the making of tools seeded our earliest sense of destiny. To shape stone into blade is to believe in tomorrow, to prepare for dangers not yet faced. It is foresight, imagination, will. Each tool is not only a weapon, it is a promise that humanity will not surrender, that the hunted will fight back, that extinction will not claim us easily. And so, the tools of resistance became more than survival. They became symbols, symbols of courage, of defiance, of the human spirit sharpened against the teeth of the world. In every spear and blade lay a declaration: we will not remain powerless, we will not remain prey. There came a moment when the world shifted. For millions of years humanity had crouched in shadows, watching, waiting, fearing. Our bones bore the marks of teeth, our lives hung by a thread, our nights echoed with the laughter of hyenas and the roars of lions. But with fire in our camps and weapons in our hands, something began to change. Slowly, cautiously, the balance of terror tipped. The hunted were becoming hunters. Imagine a band of humans on the plains at dusk. They move with purpose, not in fear but in coordination. Each carries a spear, stone-tipped, hardened by fire. They surround a watering hole where lions drink. Once, this place would have been untouchable, a domain of predators. Tonight, the humans circle, shouting, waving torches. The lions snarl, uncertain, then retreat into the grass. For the first time, the kings of the plains yield ground. For the first time, predators know fear. Science reveals this transformation in layers of evidence. Cut marks on bones show humans taking down not only herbivores, but also dangerous carnivores. Archaeological sites reveal coordinated hunts, weapons designed for thrusting into thick hides, blades sharp enough to pierce bone. Predators that once dominated landscapes, giant lions, saber-toothed cats, hyenas, began to vanish soon after human arrival in new regions. Coincidence or consequence? The timing suggests something more. Humanity was no longer food. Humanity had become competition. Speculative reflection whispers, what must it have felt like that first time a predator fled before us? To see a lion retreat into the shadows, to hear hyenas scatter at the sound of shouting, to watch fear flicker in the eyes of the very creatures that once defined fear itself. It must have been intoxicating, transformative, a revelation that we were no longer powerless. The balance of the world was shifting, and we were the ones shifting it. Now picture the hunt of a mammoth. Once, such giants were untouchable, their size enough to deter even the fiercest predator. But humans in groups, with spears and fire, learned to surround, to harry, to wound until the beast collapsed. The kill fed dozens, even hundreds for days. It was dangerous, yes, but it was possible. No predator before us had dared to think this way. Only humans imagined strategies that made the impossible attainable. Speculation deepens. Perhaps this was the birth of confidence, of pride, of ambition. To stand over the carcass of a lion, to see predators as prey, must have sparked something primal, the realization that we were no longer bound by fear. Each victory reinforced the lesson. We could master the world that once mastered us. Science adds weight to this vision. Fossils reveal predator populations declining as humans spread into their ranges. The cave lion, once dominant across Europe and Asia, disappeared. The saber-toothed cats, apex predators of the Americas, vanished not long after human arrival. The giant hyenas, rulers of caves, gave way to smaller descendants. Even terror birds of South America fell silent when humans came. We do not know if we exterminated them directly, or if our encroachment, hunting, and competition slowly eroded their survival. But the pattern is unmistakable. Predators who once hunted us began to fade, and humans rose in their place. Picture again the firelit circle at night. Once eyes glowed beyond the flame, predators waiting, watching. Now the eyes are fewer, more distant, hesitant. The fire is not just defense, it is declaration. The humans gathered there are no longer prey cowering in fear. They are hunters, warriors, beings who have turned the tools of survival into weapons of dominance. Speculative reflection suggests that this change did not only alter the world outside us, it altered the world within us. Once defined by fear, humanity began to redefine itself as master, as apex, as the creature that stood above all others. This was more than survival. It was identity. To be human was no longer to be hunted. It was to hunt. But victory was not absolute. Every hunt carried danger, every predator still capable of killing. Yet the psychological shift mattered more than numbers. Even if humans were still vulnerable, they now saw themselves differently. The hunted had tasted blood and found that it could be theirs. That taste changed everything. Now imagine a story told around the fire. An elder recalls the time when lions ruled, when hyenas drove humans from caves, when crocodiles dragged the thirsty into the depths. Then they tell of a hunt where lions were driven off, where spears struck true, where fire held the night. The children listen wide-eyed, not with despair but with pride. The story is not of helpless prey. It is of ancestors who fought, who endured, who conquered. The narrative shifts. Myth changes. Humanity begins to tell itself a new story. That we are the hunters now. Science confirms this narrative shift in the archaeological record. By 40,000 years ago, humans were apex predators across continents. Herds were managed, hunted systematically, sometimes driven into extinction. Lions and saber-tooths dwindled. Wolves, once rivals, became partners, tamed into dogs that joined us in the hunt. The ecosystem itself reshaped under human hands. No other species in history had risen from prey to apex in such a short span of time. Speculative echoes linger. What if this transformation carried within it the seeds of all that followed: civilization, conquest, even empire? To turn predators into prey is to overturn the natural order itself. Once we knew we could master lions, what else could we not master? The world became not a place of survival, but of opportunity. The hunted had become the hunters, and in that shift lay the blueprint for everything humanity would one day build. And yet, the memory of fear never left. Even as apex predators, humans carried within them the lessons of prey: vigilance, caution, imagination. We did not shed our past. We carried it into our new role, sharper, wiser, more relentless. That combination, predator's power with prey's paranoia, may be what made us truly unstoppable. Thus, in the long arc of history, we see the turning point, when fire and weapons, strategy and unity transformed fragile prey into apex hunter. The hunted had risen, and the predators who once ruled the world began to fade into memory, into myth, into extinction. Once, the world itself seemed to conspire against us. Every shadow hid fangs, every river masked jaws, every open plain was ruled by creatures larger, faster, deadlier than we could ever hope to be. We were not masters then. We were fragile, trembling, hunted. Our bones bore the truth, scattered and scarred by predators who saw us as nothing more than another meal in the endless cycle of life and death. And yet, against all odds, we endured. Through fear we learned vigilance. Through loss we found wisdom. Through unity we discovered strength. Fire gave us light in the dark. Weapons gave us defiance. And together they gave us something greater still: the chance to imagine ourselves not as prey, but as something more. Slowly, painfully, we clawed our way upward until even the greatest predators began to fear us. But the question lingers, echoing across the millennia. Did we survive because we defeated the monsters of our age, or because they created us? Were the claws and fangs that haunted our nights, the very crucible that forged our minds, our tools, our spirit? Without them, would we have remained small, silent, prey forever? Or was it only in the presence of terror that humanity became human? The truth may never be certain, but in every myth of monsters, in every tale of dragons, demons, and beasts of the night, we hear the faint echo of that ancient struggle. We still fear the dark, we still look over our shoulders, we still feel the weight of unseen eyes. These are not flaws, they are reminders. We are creatures shaped by fear as much as by fire, by the predators we fled as much as by the victories we claimed. So we return at last to the fire. A lone flame flickers in the blackness, its light fragile, its warmth small. Beyond its glow, countless eyes glimmer in the dark, patient, watchful, waiting, and yet within that circle of light, humanity sits together, trembling but enduring. From that fragile flame, from that defiance against the night, our future was born.